Metaphor Fantazio launched to both critical and player acclaim. Being Atlus's latest entry, Metaphor is a derivation from its globally popular Persona series, taking cues from its gameplay and even its narrative structure. But what sets Metaphor apart from its predecessors is its introduction to a brand new universe. And with this new world comes new characters, environments, music, and even new gameplay. Before I get into the main topic of this video, I want to spend a few moments discussing the aim and the objective of what I'm trying to portray. If you want to skip ahead to the game design discussion, you can. I'll put up a timestamp right there. So this is the first time I'm doing something like this with my face in front of the camera. Spending a lot of time editing. You can see my bedroom in the background. My bed's not made yet. Mom would be very proud. The main reason why I'm doing these things is I'm truly passionate about video games, and not just playing them, but understanding their development cycle. You know, I love reading about video games, whether it's through magazines or articles online. I love watching YouTube videos from content creators on game design. I love scrolling through Twitter and keeping up with the current state of affairs. It's truly a passion for me. But oftentimes when I'm playing a lot of these critically acclaimed games, I find myself having my own thoughts on how I'd go about improving them. Now I want to be very clear. I'm not a game developer. I have no idea what it's like to work in this industry. I'm making these videos to be purely informational and constructive, and offer solutions to the problems I see when I'm playing these games. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so Metaphor Fantazio is an incredible feat, and one that I hope a lot of people will get to enjoy one day. Katsuro, Hishino, and Studio Zero created this universe, but it's really inspired by its Persona series, which if you like those games, you're definitely going to enjoy this game. And let me start off by giving a brief introduction into the world, and some of its narrative elements, and I'll try to keep spoilers to a minimum, but just know going ahead that there are going to be a few spoilers. So this world consists of a kingdom ruled by a king. The king, in its opening act, is murdered by the antagonist of the game, and this basically sends the public into a frenzy of anxiety. There's a lot of monsters, roaming around this world that are called humans, and there are several tribes within the public that all have their implicit biases towards each other. And initially, like when I was going through my first playthrough, I thought like these tribes were supposed to represent maybe something of the real world, like, races or sex identities or even countries. But I found out that that wasn't the case, like, at all. And I found out because I watched this wonderful documentary on the development of Metaphor, which I encourage all of you to go watch. I've linked it in the description below. But yeah, so these species are rather divided by geopolitics. So you'll have the Parapists, who are poor and they always want to revolt against the rich. You have the affluent Ishkia, who holds several important positions around the government. Clamar, that make up the majority of the population, leading these revolts across the land. And way in last place, and probably hated and misunderstood the most, is the Elda tribe, which fittingly happens to be you, the protagonist. The late king, without having a present heir, is brought back to form through magic, and he announces that the new king will be chosen by the public, thus promoting a tournament for the throne. And you, the protagonist, enter this race primarily to eliminate the antagonist, who's a very popular candidate. And in other words, this plays out to be a candidacy game. You win the hearts and minds of the public, and you'll end up becoming king. And this plot got me so excited. You know, my mind was going crazy with ideas. You're literally starting in last place and you'll rise to the top to become the king. But how are you going to do that? Are you going to travel across the land running your campaign, fighting for your ideals? Are you going to side with certain tribes with their geopolitics? Are you going to go against other tribes? And all this with all the tools presented in front of you. This game has a wonderful calendar system which splits the main story missions and gives days for the player to decide how they want to spend their time. And when you do these side quests, the game has a popularity ranking system that shows how well you're doing against all the other candidates. Moreover, you have the opportunity to debate other candidates and either win their supporters with the right speech, or potentially even lose supporters by choosing the wrong dialogue option. And my impression was that if I didn't gain enough popularity by the next main story mission, the game would end, as in my run for the throne would fall short. Disappointingly, that's not the case. The story progresses regardless of this popularity system. At the end of each main mission, which there's 11 of these, your popularity will automatically jump or drop to a predetermined state. This is a huge missed opportunity. Alright, let's talk about the holy gaming triangle. Yeah, I've put on a new hoodie. I even got a haircut. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This shit takes weeks for me to edit. I have no idea how YouTubers do this for a living. Takes me way too long. Anyways, let's talk about this triangle. So what I mean by this triangle is, well, it's not really a triangle. It's more of a pillar segment to identify different types of game design. So I'll start with, the environmental design on this bottom left corner. For the most part, I feel like AAA studios, they get this part right. Even Ubisoft, that puts out like an Assassin's Creed, like a FIFA every year, gets this part right. No one plays these games and goes, yeah, it really doesn't look like Greece to me. It looks more like China. Or even Black Myth Wukong that came out earlier this year. No one's out here judging the fact that that game doesn't look visually impressive. And the same can be said about Metaphor. Metaphor's visual, artistic design, its sound, music, it's not acid flip like some of the terrible Steam games you see out there. It's a very good game in terms of environmental design. But then we start focusing on some of those other pillars where we talk about progression. And this comes down to what's driving the player to continue on this journey. That goes to level design, the narrative or career mode if that exists, the acting, the tools presented, like abilities for the characters to level up. And the last pillar, and a pillar that's becoming increasingly more important due to its lack of creativity and innovation in the industry, is the gameplay pillar. And that's not to say that, there aren't some amazing games out there that haven't innovated on gameplay. We'll touch on those. But what I mean by that is a lot of these AAA studios tend to focus a lot of their efforts on environment and progression, and they leave gameplay behind because iteration 1 of the game sold really well, and now we're going to safe play it for all future iterations. I totally understand the strategy behind this. It's risk abatement. But some of the greatest game developers, some of the greatest creative directors have always pushed the boundary on gameplay more than any of the other two pillars. So let's discuss more about how Metaphor can improve upon its progression and gameplay. I'm going to start with the progression pillar and the popularity system I alluded to before. The popularity system should be a requirement to proceed towards the next calendar-marked narrative mission. Each side quest should help to increase popularity, but certain side quests should reward the player more than others. So let's put forth an example of choice to either support a townsperson reflecting a certain tribe's political views. A parapus is fighting for a socialistic ideal that the government must provide everybody with rations, housing, and a job, whereas an Ishkia may be fighting to lower small business tax on real estate to grow their business. Both these ideals are presented to the player and voice valid concerns for the governing body, but a choice needs to be made. You're short on time with the calendar mechanic and need to buy in support. Perhaps supporting the parapus leads to broad spread support across their entire tribe, increasing your popularity more than supporting the Ishkia. But instead, if the player decided to support the Ishkia, they'll fund your campaign more, giving you more money to buy weapons, armor, upgrades to your submarine with legs. These choices don't alter the narrative structure as a whole, but provide unique gameplay for individual players. Having your cast of companions allows you to learn more about each tribe and political struggles, which then allows the player to gather information before making those decisions. The flexibility to campaign encourages subsequent playthroughs for players to try different approaches. Even a single playthrough can crash if the player poorly optimizes their given time to campaign, not allowing the player to gain enough popularity to proceed to the next tournament stage. Thus, having the player reload a prior save and reprioritize how they're going to align with their supporters. All these foundations are in the game. I already put together an example of how spending time with a certain tribe can alter your campaign, but prioritizing certain bounties that are causing havoc to certain regions or tribes, and or even making speeches to show support to a particular political cause can also increase your popularity. This allows the popularity system to be more integrated with the narrative as an objective rather than just a superficial counter. Next, let's talk about the gameplay pillar. Turn-based combat is pretty tricky to innovate on since it's been pretty refined to date, but that doesn't mean that it's perfect. In fact, turn-based combat is one of my least favorite types of gameplay. There is a bit of strategy involved with every turn, but oftentimes I find myself just pressing a button and then waiting for an animated cutscene to pursue before it's my turn again. Especially some of the late game bosses, you'll find yourself waiting up to 2 minutes before it's your turn again. So to keep the player engaged, let's add some mini games. The critical hit and miss action specifically. These functions are out of the player's control, as your ability to increase them happens by either tuning up your rank stats, agility helps to increase your chances by missing an enemy's attack, and luck increases your chance of landing critical hits. Or you can take certain items and use certain skills to increase their chances as well. Instead, let's bring in the sliding bar mechanic from Undertale to deal the most damage. If you land outside the critical zone, you deal regular damage, but if you land within the zone, you deal critical hit damage. The rank up system where you build up towards your stats should help to widen this zone, and the items and skills you use should help to slow down the needle. This gets the player involved outside of just waiting for a cutscene to ensue. Moreover, let's introduce a parrying mechanic when the enemy attacks to completely dodge an attack. There is a resist function that exists if your build is immune to a certain attack, but you're not always guaranteed a miss from an enemy. Instead, let's give the player the choice to avoid an attack if they perfectly parry it. Similar to Dark Souls, the active parry shouldn't be easy but should feel earned. And as mentioned with the critical hit mechanic, the time to parry should increase as you rank up the agility stat. These changes aren't going to expand this triangle in a transcendent way. No, that's not the point. The idea is taking strides to continuously improve on design. There were several times when I was playing Metaphor, and outside of its beautiful environmental design and narrative, I couldn't shake the feeling that I've played a game like this before. But I don't want to leave you with a sour taste of this game. Metaphor ReFantazio is a good game. It's well worth the price of admission, and I hope everyone gets to experience it. Amongst the AAA garbage that gets strolled out every year, Metaphor is a game that I'll remember. I hope Atlas and Studio Zero continue to make groundbreaking narrative adventures. That's their bread and butter. But I hope they bring something new to the table for progression and gameplay with their next iteration. Remember, these are my opinions alone. Maybe you enjoyed the game and you wouldn't want to see a change at all, and that's okay. I always go back to the holy triangle of gaming, and I hope to see more of a balance with this industry going forward. Thanks for watching, and as always, grateful.